Budget and Finance, Transportation and Infrastructure meeting. We're here to discuss the proposed stormwater capacity fee being proposed by Metro Water. We're going to be here for just a little bit so they can explain to us what's going on. Mr. Pulley could not be here this afternoon. He sends his regrets. So if you could introduce yourselves for everybody at home and out in the audience, and you're free to go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members of council, Chair Roden. My name is Scott Potter. I'm the Director of Metro Water Services. To my right is Tony Newmeyer. He's the leader of our Development Services Center. And over to my left, we've got Cyrus Tucci, our Chief Engineer, Tom Palco, our Chief Engineer for Stormwater, Mr. John Honeysucker, who you all know well, Mr. Jim Snyder, and Mary Peoples. We are Sonia Almonds in the back. She's masked up because I think she's recovering a little bit from an illness. But I want to say, first and foremost, I want to extend my deep appreciation to Councilmember Syracuse for his work on this. He has been diligent, he's been patient, and he's been a great facilitator. And I want to say thank you to Councilman Syracuse for doing that. I want to present first kind of the statement of the problem and what we're trying to do to correct the problem and make our ability to fund capital projects associated with stormwater infrastructure more fair. So first, the first slide, it demonstrates just how much impervious square surfaces we are creating in Nashville each year. So if you take 2020, 21, and 22 fiscal years, an average of over 112 million square feet of impervious area was created, okay? So what that means is you had a surface that could absorb water, and now you have 112 million square feet that could not. And that is kind of the problem statement, and that goes back, obviously, a long time from a development perspective. Now I'm going to talk about the annual runoff volume per acre to give you an idea of what it means on a smaller scale. So our average rainfall is about 47 inches of rain per year, and it's been pretty consistent over the last 5 to 10 years, but we do have years that are higher than that, years that are lower than that. But the official U.S. climate data says 47.25 inches per year. So 95% of that, when it hits an impervious surface, is going to run off. So that means you're going to have 44.9 inches of rain that runs off. And that calculates to 1.2 million gallons per impervious acre. And then you drill that down, it's 28 gallons per impervious square foot. So I always try to remind people to visualize that. And if you take 28-gallon milk jugs, you will have that much volume of water running off of a square foot every time it rains. So that's that kind of drives that down a little bit. So what's a capacity fee? I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about capacity fees that already exist. We have a water capacity fee and a sewer capacity fee, and those capacity fees directly fund the projects that we identify in our capital plan that provide for the required improvements to the system as a result of the development that caused it. So on a water capacity fee, you build a new building, there's an additional demand on our water system for that water. There's a capacity fee associated with that because you're removing capacity from our ability to provide it. On the wastewater side, it's the same event, but it's even easier to see because you can visualize a pipe that has wastewater in it. There's a certain amount of capacity in that pipe, and when you add more wastewater flow to it, you remove capacity from that pipe. So we charge a capacity fee because of the direct relationship between the development and the water and sewer demands. The second thing is it really established an equitable financial process for the required capital. Okay, so why a stormwater capacity fee? Well, one thing to note is we really haven't recognized the stormwater system as its own utility, because the water system distributes water to our citizens. The wastewater collection system collects the wastewater and delivers it to our plants. The stormwater system is just like that. It collects the stormwater and conveys it to the closest receiving stream. So there is specific capacity in the stormwater system, and when we remove capacity from it, it needs to be compensated for. So knowing we have the existing capacity fees on the water and sewer side, we're proposing a similar capacity fee to account for the additional loss of impervious surface. So now let's discuss the difference between what we already have versus what we're proposing. We have a stormwater user fee already. And what that does, all property owners within Davidson County pay that. And that is designed to fund the operation and repair and maintenance of the existing system. It also provides for funds to maintain compliance with our federal and state regulatory requirements. So that already exists, and we use that to do capital projects, but they're on a small scale. And we've been doing that since 2009, and it's been very successful, but we haven't identified the funding mechanism that fairly accounts for the demand on the capacity of the existing stormwater infrastructure. So I'm going to turn it over at this point to Tony Newmeyer, and he's going to explain kind of the process to how we got here.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Can you guys hear me okay? Just want to make sure because I'm not hearing. Okay. This actually started about probably 4 years ago addressing this problem that Scott's kind of started discussing today. Okay. What we tried to do, there we go. What we tried to do is when development came in, they're having to connect to the system, so we had to figure out the stormwater system, so we had to figure out a way to have them successfully do that and not creating more problems. So as we started working back and forth, it's kind of a difficult issue from an engineering standpoint because of the system that's there. So we started working with the engineering firms, the developers, to try to come up with a way that we could do this. And developers were all for it. You know, they want to pay their fair share. The engineering firms want to be involved in it, and we wanted to find a solution for it. So that's when we started coming up with the idea of trying to solve it through some kind of fee that's only coming from development. That's not going to be everybody. So as part of that, we hired a firm, a financial firm, to go out there and do a rate study for us. We based that off of the square footage of impervious area. We came up with an amount that we wanted to generate in revenue, and that's how we came up with the actual fee. We're going to go to the next one. I'm going to read this one, and then I'm going to discuss a little bit about it because I think it's kind of important just to make sure I say everything that's in here. Properties applying for an infill or grading permit with a post-development impervious surface area exceeding 800 square feet will be charged 71 cents per square feet for that project area. We put in the limit of the 800 square feet because there are people that are out there that are doing something to their house. We don't want to have them impact and all of a sudden they're having to pay an extra fee just for putting a stair, maybe a concrete walkway. We don't want that triggered to have to pay that fee. Not to penalize, homeowners. This is really for development side. And again, the fee was charged for that. And we went back and looked at examples of how many people it impact, and that's where we kind of came up with 800 square feet. And that's also a limit on the stormwater side for the infill side. So that kind of went together well. Next slide is an example of pre-development and post-development site. You can see the pre-development was a little over 5,100 square feet. Post-development was 9,700 square feet. So it increased by 4,600 square feet. Applying that based on the post-impervious surface that includes the 800, because the 800 square feet is only to exclude people from having to pay this fee. This site would pay a little over $6,900 for this development. Project area. This is also important to we understand the actually how we're charging it and how the fees are going to be applied. You can't double bill an impervious area once you charge them once. So once they pay this fee, they're not going to be charged again for that same pervious area development. But if you refer back to the previous slide, let's say they put in a parking lot off the top side of that, they would pay the cost for that additional pervious area. So there's no double charging on that. The maximum fee we came up with for this was $500,000. That equates to, and that's a cap for each development site. I know we've already received some questions about this. There are a small percentage of our, we went back and kind of analytically reviewed 3 years of data to see how many properties were impacted. And it's really a small percentage, but if you're trying to do a target revenue and you don't have a cap on it, what you're going to do is that small percentage of people are going to pay a large amount, and then the rest of the people really aren't going to pay them. They're not going to contribute to it. So you're going to have a lot of people paying a little amount and just a handful paying a lot. So you're not really distributing the fee across all the different development sizes. Where's the money going to go? What are we going to do with it? Right now, we do have an extension and replacement fund that Stormwater, that Metro Water puts their money into. That's where the money that's collected in the combined sewer area will go there. We don't have this created yet, but once this passes, we're going to create it. Hopefully this does pass. We'll create this, and they're going to have a capital fund for the non-combined area, the MS4 area. So those funds will be used in those areas to make improvements based on the development. Downstream development criteria. It's already, we really based the policy off of the Stormwater Management Manual. We don't want to not follow what's in there, like connecting to a system of sufficient capacity and things like that. So what we did was we referenced in the last update of the manual, we referenced a policy for the downstream, how to handle the downstream projects. And that's what we've been working on for probably the last 3 years. And we're basically done. We're working, that's something we work with the development community on, the engineers, both internal to Metro Water. We work with Tom and Cyrus and Scott, and just anybody who wanted to get involved with it, because we want to make sure that how we implement this, we actually get the benefits out of it that we're trying to achieve. And I'm going to get to that in the next slide. The big issue that it caused when we tried to make the safe connections to the system 3-4 years ago and trying to find a solution, it was delaying the plan review process. Because what you're doing is you're going in there and the developer doesn't exactly know what they're supposed to do when they're doing their financial plans for their project or the pro formas or whatever you want to call them. And they're putting their money together, and then they're coming in and they're talking to us, and then we're saying, oh, you didn't look at this, you didn't see that, that's going to cost you X. They didn't plan for it, they didn't account for it, it's not in their critical path. So that's where we start this, that's where I think people started grumbling a little bit, is like, well, I get what you're doing, but this is slowing our project down. So one of the big accomplishments of this, there are two, is to get funding to do these projects and help in partnership with development while they're paying for their impact to the system and to speed up the process. So that's what the policy is going to do, is it's going to box in and define what the expectations are for developers. So that the policy, you can't write a policy that'll accomplish 100% compliance, but we're trying to get it up into the 90% so that we can expedite plan reviews. They know what they're going to do. They can set up their financial structure. So when they come in with a plan, they should be well on their way and not have a lot of questions. And again, again, for us, the benefit is time too, and the money to do the improvements to the system.
So this is the ordinance that's before the council at this point. It would go into effect on 1 July 2023, and the development community would have the choice at that point. If they have projects in the pipeline, they can stay where they are, or they can elect to use the new fee structure. Anything after July 1, 2023 would have this ordinance in effect. So I want to kind of trace the money a little bit. So the council passed earlier an ordinance requiring us to do stormwater master plans. So those are well on the way. One of the things to kind of note, the combined system is 7,800 acres or so. The MS4 is over 500 square miles. So the MS4, which is outside the combined system, which is pretty much most of the county, you know, Tom has a very, very big hill to climb to identify all of the projects that are in that 500 square miles. So what we've done is we've taken bites of the MS4 and we're analyzing them kind of independently and individually to get projects created. On the combined side, Cyrus has already developed some good projects that we could employ using this funding. So I want to remind the council that our philosophy has always been the first priority is life safety, second priority is property protection, and the third priority is nuisance. So we'll keep that philosophy in place on all of the projects that we do. And once again, the results of the stormwater master plans will drive our decision-making process. So the last slide is kind of going to be difficult for me because I really hate reading slides, but this really tells the story. The centralized approach to stormwater management on the combined and separate storm sewers. The defined expectation from the development community. This works in both directions. Right now, every developer comes in facing a negotiation with us about what stormwater infrastructure is required. That places them in a big disadvantage. It also places us in a time crunch, because if we had that time to do plans review, we would be able to do a better job of getting plans reviewed. So we remove the time demand on us and place more certainty on the development community's financial requirements on their performance. This does demonstrate to our citizens that we're serious about identifying who's responsible for the required improvements and making sure that they pay for them. Okay, so it's always a question of who's going to pay for the improvements. Well, in a capacity fee environment, the person or the development that's placing the demand on the system pays for the capacity fees. And then the dedicated funding source, we get about $34 to $35 million a year on our stormwater user fee. Part of that is for capital, but most of that capital is for repair or improvement to existing infrastructure. And I'm sure y'all still get those phone calls from your constituents that want their stormwater project done. The big thing that this will help us to do, especially in the combined system, is those significant projects that will make a significant dent in the problem. So to conclude my remarks, I think this is fair. And the best part about this is the development community and their attorneys and their engineers were part of this process. Councilmember Syracuse, when I mentioned he displayed a great deal of patience, he was in a lot of those meetings where this was, enthusiastically discussed. And we came to a reasonable approach where no one got everything they wanted. It was a good discussion that resulted in a good outcome that's fair. So I just think this is really good legislation, and I think it's a really good idea, and I really hope that y'all will support it. So what questions do y'all have?
Councilmember Allen, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is great. I know uncertainty drives anybody crazy, and having something that speeds up the review process is going to be welcomed by everybody. The one question I have is about the $500,000 cap, and I've gone back and forth with several of the team about this, because looking at the numbers that I had seen in one of the earlier discussions, I had done the math and come up with 22 cents a square foot for everybody, and without the cap, and that seems fair to me. I mean, there are like a dozen people that are in that top tier of over 500,000 that would be paying $1 million. And I know $1 million is a lot, but I mean, that's a smaller percentage of their overall building cost than it is for the little guys who we're now bumping theirs from 22 cents a square foot up to 71 cents a square foot. So is it less expensive to provide stormwater capacity for a bigger project? I mean, is there an economic justification for that, or just?
Well, Council Lady, you have to have entering arguments and boundary conditions to any mathematical problem. Mm-hmm. So we think with a lot of enthusiasm that $500,000 cap is reasonable. Because if you get those developments that are enormous and they pay that big fee, I do agree that it's going to be a smaller percentage of their overall costs. But we're kind of at that point taking a risk of losing revenue if we drive the 22 cents down, I mean the 71 to 22, because if we don't have those big developments, we're losing the revenue. And part of the goal of this is to raise the revenue to do good projects. So there is a balance. I'm not going to dispute your point. It's completely valid. But I feel pretty strongly that we've come up with something that's fair.
And is that typical? I mean, I guess there was an issue about whether there's a cap on the other fees as well.
There is a cap on the stormwater user fee as well.
Okay, so it's at least consistent with that. Okay, and could this apply to large residential that's over 800 square foot, or is this just, so it's just anybody, commercial or residential, over 800 square feet of impervious surface?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Because that, once again, I think that's fair.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Vice Chair Gamble, you recognize. Oh, I'm sorry, you're in Jonathan's. I'm sorry. Now you're recognized, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here, and thank you for presenting this. This looks like a very more efficient way to operate the stormwater and address community concerns with development and impervious pavement. My question has to do with has there been any consideration, or how will you all equitably distribute or decide on how the revenue comes in go towards projects? How would that be done?
I'm going to go back to our philosophy that we've had in place since we started this. We're always going to focus on life safety and then property protection and nuisance. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit that if I've got stormwater in my backyard, I don't think that's a nuisance. Okay, I think that's a property protection issue. But if I've got my backyard with an inch of water on it and it drains when it stops raining, that just doesn't fall into the same category of a life safety issue. As you can well imagine, a lot of development is within the combined system because generally speaking, it's in the developed area, the urban area. So you're going to see a lot of investment in the combined system, but that really serves another really good purpose for this city because it goes right back to our consent decree on the wastewater system. If we remove water from the combined system, it aids us in compliance with our consent decree. And it also provides for, we can use that money for projects that are more directly influenced by the combined system. So I really think that if we keep our philosophy consistent, the additional revenue will be able to do more projects that should be done quicker. Does that make sense?
Yes, I guess my concern is that there might be more developments in a particular area, but that funding is going to be countywide.
Well,
so deciding how to address that area's flooding problems.
One thing Tom has gotten really good at is bang for his buck kind of thing. He does projects that help the majority of people. Initially, me and Tom was putting out fires. And over the course of his career here, I think he's developed a really good sense for which projects make sense. And it's kind of hard to quantify that, but there's really no one else in the city more qualified to make those decisions. So I'd rather Tom make the decision than anybody else.
It'd be great too if you all have a system, a scoring system, a rating system in place like we do with traffic calming so that it could be totally objective.
Well, I'm going to counter that with a little bit. The phrase that we use in engineering is sound engineering judgment. And that is a real phrase that is applicable kind of in a court of law almost. And that goes back to Tom's experience and his staff's experience. We really need to maintain our philosophy because we really do know the real problem areas and we know how to correct them. And I'd rather take that approach than not. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Council Member Nash in Council Member Glover's spot. You're recognized.
I'm a little confused about how this speeds up the review process.
Okay.
I certainly see where
All right, I'll walk you through. I'll walk you through a
comes, but
scenario.
if I come in to do a project, you're still going to tell me I have to have a retention pond over here, and
Okay. So here's, I'm going to be a developer. Well, actually, I'll make you a developer so I can yell at you. So you come in with a big project, okay, and you've got off-site, I'm not going to say problems, but you impact off-site, right? So with that happening, at this point, you've immediately introduced a negotiation with us about how you're going to fix that. And that can go on forever because we have a philosophy, the developer has a philosophy, what's fair, what's not fair, and it goes around and around and around. And I have had numerous conversations with my friends in the development community that they pound the table, just tell me what I've got to do. Okay? Well, Tony mentioned earlier that if you write a policy, you can never capture all of the elements that may be in play. So for both parties, this provides as much certainty as we can create. They know what they need to pay, and they pay it. And then we take that money and we do the improvements that we see. So in removing the negotiation, I mean, Tony, if we get that time back, that's better for everybody.
so the developer won't be doing the mitigation things. The city will be doing that based upon the fees they're getting.
The developer cannot harm their neighbors with their discharge, but they have to pay this capacity fee to provide the funds that we can do the improvements that we see necessary.
Gotcha.
So it becomes like an aggregate thing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Young, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I'm curious when we talk about that top 5% or whatever, that cap is what kind of development is that large anyway? Like what's an example of something that would be that big? Like, are you talking about like a college campus or something like that?
Our go-to is always our friends at the airport. They have that kind of space.
Right.
If you got to think about an area that's not developed.
Right.
That's going to create a lot of impervious surface. That's the kind of thing we're looking at.
Sure.
And there's just not that many areas out there that are that big. So,
well, and that helps, I guess, to understand who it is, kind of helps understand why that cap is probably a good thing, so that we're not penalizing, growth and expansion at the airport or whoever's doing something.
But we are getting $500,000. We're getting a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. So do we think, and maybe in the talks with the development community, could this potentially work as some sort of incentive that some of the developers will see as a reason to want to explore things like green roofs and stuff like that.
Well, we already encourage that.
Right.
They're required to capture the first inch of rain that falls on their site. So we're all over that already. This is kind of in addition to that.
Right, because I guess that would be a surface that we would then count as pervious if they're doing a true green roof, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you look down from the sky on a square of property, we don't want the rain to leave that square. And that's the best case scenario for us. We want it to be whatever that word is. We want it to stay on site in whatever form it takes.
So then I guess I would think it's fair for us to say this is sort of like an indirect incentive to someone to use green roofs and things like that. So
if I'm a developer, I'm doing cartwheels at this opportunity.
Okay.
Because it removes uncertainty, and in that world, they don't like uncertainty.
But Director, now I kind of wish you let me know when you become a developer, because I want to see these cartwheels.
Okay. Maybe Jimmy Granberry can do cartwheels for it.
Okay. And so I guess we want to make sure, is this going to apply to all development going on?
No, 800 square feet.
No, I mean government development.
Yeah.
Okay.
For us, if Metro Water Services.
Correct, because we're...
Yeah, no one's excluded.
No one's excluded because everyone's water runs off the same, no matter if it's a church or a school or a MDHA property, the runoff is the same. And I guess if you could put this in at the risk of sounding condescending, not to you, but what's a way you think to better message this to homeowners and residents, because when we talk about how this is the square footage and what this is going to go into this capital fund and whatnot, I mean, what do you think maybe is your way of saying how great this is? Because this is huge. And those in the development community will understand this, and those of us that know what impervious surface is will understand how huge and great this is. But
I think it's...
What do you recommend to us trying to sell this and explain how great and wonderful this is to everyday Davidson County residents?
Just like development pays for the required additional capacity in our water system and our wastewater system, they're paying the same thing for the stormwater system, which is it's just another utility. And it's a little ironic in that you can actually see the stormwater system. You can drive around and see it. And it is a utility. It looks like a ditch on occasion, but it's a conveyance. So development is going to pay their fair share, just like a homeowner would, for the impervious area they're creating. So I think it's a really good demonstration of fairness and demonstration that development is going to be paying their fair share, which I think is what their goal is as well. They don't want, they could argue not wanting to pay this. On the contrary, they partnered with us to develop this. So it's the best of both worlds. And I'll once again, Councilmember Syracuse made this happen.
Councilmember Syracuse, you look like you might want to say something.
I should. You don't want to see that. Thank you, Chair. I'm just passing along my thanks to Scott, Tony, and team. This has been a very great collaborative effort, truly kind of a private-public partnership, if you will. And we need more partnerships like this. I've been involved in these enthusiastic conversations, and it has been really nice to see how that we've come together. And this is truly addressing our rapid growth and development in ways that we've not been able to before. So I'm very happy to be sponsor of this. Thank you.
I don't see anybody else with their hand up. No one's in the queue. Mr. Potter, I want to thank you and your team for being here and explaining this to us. I know we'll have more conversations over the coming weeks on this when the legislation starts moving along. So if there's anything else you'd like to say, or if not, we're going to adjourn for the day. Without
want to say
objection.
thank you to everybody. Y'all have a good night.
Yep, without objection. We're adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.